Everybody ready? This follows our discussion that we had the other day following the press conference held in Claremore by the Rogers County law enforcement officers that indicated they had concerns about Janice Steidley, and one of the issues dealt with the fact that Ms. Steidley had revealed information with regard to John Singer in connection with which he felt were matters that would be subject to cross-examination and perhaps perjury, and referred the matter for investigation. And one of the premises of that press conference, as you recall, was that they lacked confidence in her and her judgment because that was a spurious kind of thought on her part. We received a letter yesterday from the district attorney that conducted that investigation with regard to Mr. Singer, and had reached a conclusion that he was going to prosecute Mr. Singer for perjury. And I think you'll find this chronicle of information from Rex Duncan, who did that investigation and was prepared to act, very interesting with regard to what the OSBI did and how they reacted and what led to the press conference the other day. So with that being said, if you have any questions, we invite you to review this information, and I think it will put in context what's occurring in Rogers County. Does anybody have any questions?
It's kind of hard that having read this.
Yes. Well, what took place was exactly as District Attorney Steidley believed. There were serious issues concerning the affidavit that Mr. Singer had filed. There were serious concerns about the potential for perjury or perjury as a result of a videotape that was taken contemporaneously with the interview of the subject. A different DA looked at it, objectively looked at it, and found that he felt it to be perjury and wanted to proceed with perjury charges, but his investigation and actions were interrupted and terminated by a different OSBI investigation that occurred.
Have you spoken with the Assistant AG, Mr. Bates, about this matter? Have you spoken with the Assistant AG, Mr. Bates?
Not since we received this letter. Mr. Bates did inform Ms. Steidley's office that there were no charges that were going to be brought against Mr. Singer, and we were not aware of the extensiveness of this investigation, what Mr. Duncan had found at the time.
So who looked at it first? I'm just trying to catch up here. Did Mr. Duncan or Mr. Smith, Dennis Smith?
Mr. Duncan.
Okay, he did it first. Okay, it was re-signed to Dennis.
Yes. What's interesting when you read the letter, and Mr. Duncan very carefully chronicles the communications and what took place and what led to him being removed and Mr. Smith being put in place. And what's particularly important, I think, and the reason we felt it was important to call you back today to talk about this, was the whole premise for the press conference the other day was this idea that Ms. Steidley's judgment was somewhat in question because she had accused or thought that Mr. Singer might be involved in impropriety in connection with that interview. In fact, it's documented carefully here, and so Mr. Duncan actually responded in letter when he read the press reports about that press conference.
And what I would like to stress, as I stated the other day, we conflicted out of any kind of potential charges against Mr. Singer. I sent a letter to the Attorney General's office, and I said you need to appoint another district attorney to review this. I did not ask for a district attorney to be appointed. The Attorney General's office appointed Rex Duncan. We delivered our file to Mr. Duncan's office, which he reviewed that along with the affidavits, the report, and the interrogation tape, and he came to the conclusion that there was a definite problem and that there were inconsistencies. He wanted a little bit further investigation done, but on this type of crime you can look at the affidavits, you can look at the interrogation, and you can come to a conclusion if you feel that there's an inconsistency that could lead to a criminal charge. He called in OSBI to do the investigation. During the investigation, I drew concerns with the way that they were handling it. And as you read the letter, they came to a 645-page report. Mr. Bates came to our office on August the 20th to inform us that they reassigned it to Dennis Smith, who reviewed it and determined that there would be no criminal charges. One of my main questions that I asked is, these are dealing with affidavits that you would supply to a court. So this is an affidavit you would take to a judge to have them sign, and you do so under oath. To this day, I was told by the Attorney General's office that those judges were not even interviewed for the essential elements that would be needed for Mr. Duncan to follow up with what he felt he needed to do.
So if I understand correctly, is it the AG's office that's responsible for assigning a DA when you recused yourself? Are they the responsible party?
Yes.
Okay, so they initially assigned it to DA Duncan, if I
Yes.
understand, and then they reassigned it to DA Smith?
Yes.
And so I'm confused by this letter. If DA Duncan was no longer involved, why would he send this letter to you?
Because he is stating, when you are looking at an allegation of perjury, in this particular case, you can look at the affidavits and compare it to the interrogation tape to see if they match up.
Okay, if the AG's office has reassigned it, does he still have authority to pursue charges against Detective Singer?
No, the Attorney General's office, my understanding, I believe it's in the letter, called Mr. Duncan and asked him if they could take the case back. They were looking to put it maybe before a grand jury or reassign it to another DA. He thought it would be great if it went in front of a grand jury, and it was immediately signed to another district attorney to look at.
So now it's in the hands of another district attorney?
Yes, it is in the hands of another district attorney who has supposedly reviewed it. And as you can tell from Mr. Duncan's letter, how he talked to him on August the 19th, he just started to review it. It was an extensive report, and we were informed on August the 20th by Mr. Bates that that DA had declined to file any charges.
I think the salient point that needs to be made here is that Mr. Brown got up the other day and said that there was no credibility to even the insinuation or review of the potential for perjury by Mr. Singer. This independent DA found it very clearly and was intending to prosecute. And I think he felt frustrated by the fact that the OSBI turned the investigation in a different direction, the connection between the OSBI and Mr. Singer, and the fact that nothing was ever done with it. So that's the point.
You can still be talking apples and oranges, because you can be legally impaired and still not be accused.
That is
it may not
correct.
have a perjury charge.
That is correct.
We're talking about two different things. I mean, you can have your credibility impaired by some action, and you could be criminally prosecuted by virtue of perjury. What Janice did, and I think the prudent prosecutor would do, is refer it independently, get an objective opinion, and that's what happened. This prosecutor, contrary to the statements made by Mr. Brown the other day, Chief Brown, was intending to prosecute, felt perjury was clear, and was proceeding down that pathway.
It was in there.
Yes.
Okay, but at this time, is it still open for investigation, or has this matter been closed by
I
the
don't think the
AG's office?
statute of limitations has run on it yet, and I don't think the tape or the affidavits are going to change, so we don't know what's going to happen with Mr. Singer, but at least from this objective review, this prosecutor felt he should be charged with perjury.
Although the AG's office did not? I'm just making sure I'm clear on this.
It's my understanding that the Attorney General's office never made a determination. They have never told me that they have reviewed the materials and made a determination for themselves. When we met with Tom Bates, who's the first assistant AG, on August the 20th, he hadn't even gone through all the documents, albeit one of his investigators did, and that's why they were able to answer my simple question of, did they actually interview the judges that would have been involved? This would be a very simple investigation, and even Mr. Bates admitted that to me, and also Stan Florence, the director of OSBI. But yet you come into this 645 pages, and on August the 20th, Tom Bates tells us we're not pursuing charges. On August the 26th, we have a grand jury petition against myself and many other members of my office and other elected officials.
You said that the OSBI investigation had changed directions. Were you interviewed by the OSBI during that process?
I was.
And, I'm sorry, Assistant Lair, were you interviewed by them as well?
No.
Okay.
And Mr. Vogelmuth? is that-
Yes.
What is your, you represent here?
I represent District Attorney Steidley as well in the various matters that are involved here, as well as the defamation action that's pending in Claremore.
I have one more question, if you don't mind explaining. Could you elaborate a little more on the judicial side of this? What the requirements are? You guys have made it very clear that there's a separate issue between perjury and the Giglio Brady. I just think it'd be valuable if you could maybe explain that a little bit better.
In what regard?
As far as, even if the Attorney General's office does not pursue perjury charges against John Singer, what does that mean for the pending, ongoing, I don't know what the proper word is, I apologize, but what, for the things that have been put out there about Officer Singer being a Giglio Brady?
Whether criminal charges are brought against him or not are irrelevant to the fact of the District Attorney's Office believing that we need to disclose on him. Okay? You can have, like I stated the other day, disclosure issues that do not rise to the level of criminal conduct. But I believe one of the issues in the petition for the grand jury is how the AG's office and everyone's reviewed this, and there was, no criminal charges that were sought. In this particular case, like I said, with perjury, you can look at the documents and you can review it to the tape, and a prosecutor could make the determination, unless someone's forged someone's signature or something along those lines, that yes, this could be a perjury. And that's what Mr. Duncan did. He reviewed the file along with his first assistant, and he was under the impression that he was ready to file charges.
So what do you do from here? Is there anything more for you to do? Or?
Well, I've been very concerned about this from the get-go. I've had many conversations with Stan Florence, even during the entire process of OSBI and their investigation, requesting that he step in and look and see what's going on. I have not had a return call from Stan Florence. I even talked with Tom Bates a couple of times on this issue, and the last I talked to Mr. Bates, he was reviewing the matter, and I have not heard back from him. But when you get a letter like this, it's quite alarming to me about what's going on, especially when you see how there is just a band of brothers that seems to be getting together in Rogers County, and then you throw OSBI into the mix.
Yeah, the other day, the question I think was Lori Schell had asked, or maybe it was you had asked about Singer being the principal party that created the whole issue with Janice. And the truth of the matter is, when you read this letter, it appears he runs through it all, through the OSBI investigation and to the press conference. So, anything else? Thank you.
Clark, I want to make
Yeah.
one point, because the question was asked about, given the situation now with respect to Mr. Duncan and why this letter is being written. I think we all know that attorneys have ethical obligations and professional obligations to the public and the profession. And here is a very, very well-respected prosecutor who has seen these facts develop and has felt an obligation, clearly, under the rules of conduct that are applicable to him and to Clark and myself and Janice and Bryce, to clarify what has become a situation that has been both muddied and the subject of a lot of misleading statements in the media and grand jury petition and elsewhere. So he has come forward with the truth, and this is an unassailable document, a chronology of what actually happened, not the type of argumentative speculation and finger-pointing that's been going on that's been very unfair with respect to the District Attorney's Office.
So is this in direct relation to the news stories that were on a couple nights ago? Is that why this was written in the first place?
You would have to ask Mr. Duncan that. I think, a lot of Stan Brown's statements, I mean, obviously, Mr. Duncan has an issue with everything in the way that it was handled, but you would need to ask him that. But I think if you read the letter fully, he had great issue with some statements that were made, and he wanted to clarify them.
I can address that to some degree. I did call Mr. Duncan after the press conferences to express my concern, because he had expressed to me on more than one occasion that he intended to file charges on John Singer. And I told him that things were just not being said straight. And he agreed. And I asked him if he would put something in written form. I think I may have asked for an email or a letter, just to kind of give his version of some of it. I did not expect that he had notes of this much detail. I did not ask for such a well-written, lengthy version of events that he did in fact present us.
Prior to your conversation with Mr. Duncan, did he indicate to you, or I'm sorry, obviously during your conversation, excuse me, did he indicate to you in any way that he had contacted the Attorney General or questioned their decision, or both perceived decision, not to pursue perjury charges?
I do not believe he has ever had contact with the AG's office, with Tom Bates or anybody else after he was reassigned, but you'd need to check with him to be sure about that.
Was there any explanation, or did I miss it, why it was reassigned in the first place?
That was discussed between the AG's office and us in the meeting. There were a couple of different reasons given. I don't know that basically the reasons were given were that they were concerned about his assignment because of the size of his office, and also they had some concerns about some comments that he had made about wanting to file charges before the report had been presented to him. I should say.
And again, like I stated, this is a case where you could actually look at the file itself and you could make a determination that way. I can tell you that in our meeting with Tom Bates on August the 20th, when he came up, he finally asked us, tell us how it got to this point. We sat there and we told him it was quite obvious that many law enforcement and people on their behalf had been calling the Attorney General's office, and he knew quite a bit, had documents, things of that nature, which again concerned me. That again, here you have law enforcement out there, infiltrating and calling the Attorney General's office on a matter that, you had a district attorney handling.
Also, I want to clear up one point on the investigation. Rex Duncan had called me about the file that we had submitted to him and had asked if we had a probable cause affidavit in the materials we gave him, because he couldn't find it. I explained to him that we had made no decision about whether perjury charges should be filed against Detective Singer. And in fact, that was sent to his office to make that decision. It wasn't that we'd come to a decision and then conflicted out. So we had never made the decision. So he said that he would have to call OSBI to get that affidavit presented, so he didn't actually, to my knowledge, ask for an OSBI investigation. He was actually looking for a probable cause affidavit.
So back to what you said prior to that, you were talking about law enforcement contacting the AG's office. Do you feel that they somehow interfered with their investigation, or that they somehow influenced the AG's office to make the statement, or do you completely just disregard that, Mr. Bates had made a statement at all, and that this has all been fabricated on the part of the Claremont Police Department?
That what has been fabricated on
the press release and the conference they had earlier this week, where Mr. Brown made those statements about the AG's office saying that they had cleared John Singer of Perjury.
Like I said, when we met with when we met with Tom Bates on August the 20th, he had just started to review the file. So, I mean, typically they wouldn't have given it to another district attorney. They could have actually kept it in-house for them to make a determination on, but they sent it to another DA, so that's why it makes no sense to me. But Mr. Bates has not stated to me that they also looked at it and determined that they weren't going to file charges. I spoke with Mr. Bates again on August the 21st. I called him and stated my concerns of what he said he had concerns about and how simple this case was and what they could look at. He understood that, he agreed, and he said he was looking into it because, again, I've had great concerns with the way OSBI had handled this for quite some time, and he stated he would look into it.
So do you think that they mishandled the investigation?
I can tell you my interview was absolutely inappropriate. I can tell you that my investigator, the questions that they were asking him for what Rex Duncan was asking them to do, they were off base.
One thing that Mr. Duncan makes clear in his letter as well, the district attorney that ultimately was sent to is a former OSBI agent.
So do you feel that the law enforcement agencies then the local law enforcement agencies have influenced them to go this direction then? Is that what you're saying?
I have great concern when I spoke with Tom Bates of how much contact he had received on this from parties on the other side and the documents and everything that they had been given. That's great concern to me, and I let Mr. Bates know that. And yeah.
That's it.